Hi guys, welcome back with this YouTube channel, Artificial and Facts. Thank you guys for clicking this video, I really appreciate it so much. So in this video, I'm going to talk about one topic called the Keynesian Theory of Consumption. But before we start, there are a couple of things you should know. This video contains three main parts. First, the explanation about the curve. Second, example for better understanding. And third, how to make a curve in Microsoft Excel. So without further ado, let's get started. You know, in 2005, the average American family spent about $1,350 on clothing. And for high-income families that earning more than $148, the amount spent of clothing was substantially higher, at $3,700. We all recognize that for consumption as a whole, as well as for consumption of most specific categories of goods and services. Consumption rises with income. This relationship between consumption and income is central to Keynes' model of economy. While Keynes recognized that many factors, including wealth and interest rates, play a role in determining consumption levels in the economy. Before we start with the curve, it is better if we understand first what are the basics of Keynes theory. Now, let's take a look at these. These are the assumptions of consumption theory by Keynes. All companies produce output consumed by consumer, company, or government. The main focus here is the goods market. Companies provide products at any price. The main focus here is the behavior of demand in determining output. This theory only works at the short-run approach. The economy system is closed economy, which means there is no export-import activity in here. And the main focus here is domestic demand. In his classic The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, current income played a key role. And look at this quote. The fundamental psychological law upon which we are entitled to depend with great confidence, both a priori from our knowledge of human nature and from the detailed facts of experience, is that men and women too are disposed, as a rule and on average, to increase their consumption as their incomes increase, but not by as much as the increase in their income. Keynes is telling us two things in this quote. First, if you find your income going up, you will spend more than you did before. But Keynes is also saying something about how much more you will spend. He predicts, based on his looking at the data and his understanding of people, that the rise in consumption will be less than the full rise in income. This simple observation plays a large role in helping us understand the workings of the aggregate economy. The relationship between consumption and income is called a consumption function. As I mentioned before, consumption function is an equation that explains the household consumer behavior in using the income available to spend. You know what really matters is consumer behavior is influenced by many factors, but the main factors that influence consumer behavior the most is income, or we call it Y. So now, income, or it can be abbreviated as Y, it is actually a gross income. So for example, if you guys have salary that worth $100, and how about the disposable income? Well, it is the available income to spend. This is called as YD, the abbreviation. Now, back again with your $100. It is still gross income. And as you know, the income must be subtracted by the tax income. And by this activity, we can conclude the formula of YD, or the disposable income. YD equals to income minus tax. Now it is the time for us to learn the curves. But here guys, in this video I'm not going to consumption curve, but I'm going to talk more detailed curve like aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve, especially in the Great Depression. This is classical. This is price. This right over here is real GDP. And I am going to do it for the Keynesian case as well. This is price and this right over here is real GDP. In both views of reality, or both models, you have a downward sloping aggregate demand curve for all the reasons that we've talked about in multiple videos. That's aggregate demand right over there. We've already seen it. The classical view is that in the long run, an economy's productivity or productive capacity or its output shouldn't be dependent on prices. We have seen the long-run aggregate supply curve something like this. This is the aggregate supply in the long run, or sometimes you'll have long-run aggregate supply. Sometimes it'll be referred to that, saying, hey look, all prices they are a way to signal what people want and demand and things like that. But at the end of the day, prices and money, they're just facilitating transactions. You go to work and you get paid and all of that. But then you go and use the money to go and buy other things that the economy produces, like food and shelter and transportations. All money is a way of facilitating the transactions, but the economy, in theory, based on how many people it has, what kind of technology it has, what kind of factories it has, what kind of natural resources it has, it's just going to produce what it's going to produce. If you were to just change aggregate demand, if the government were to print money and aggregate demand were too, and just to distribute it from helicopters, in this classical model, you would just have aggregate demand shift to the right. But you have this vertical long-run aggregate supply curve, so the net effect didn't change the output in this classical model. All that happens is that the price goes from this equilibrium price to this equilibrium price over here. You have the price would go up and you would just experience inflation with no increased output, and there is multiple ways you could have shifted that aggregate demand curve to the right. You could have a fiscal policy where the government, maybe it holds its tax revenue constant, but it increases spending, or it goes the other way around. It doesn't decrease, it doesn't change its spending, but it lowers tax revenue. Either of those, it tries to pump money into the economy and pushes that aggregate demand curve to the right. In this purely classical view, it says in the long run, that's not going to be any good, just will lead to inflation. The only way that you can increase the output of economy is by making it more productive. Maybe making some investments in technology. Make the economy more efficient. Maybe your population grows. The only way is to really shift this curve to the right on the supply side, right over here. Keynes didn't disagree with that, but he's sitting here in the middle of the Great Depression. He's saying, look, all of a sudden people are poor in the 1930s. Factories didn't get blown up. People didn't disappear. In fact, there are factories that want to run, but they are being shut down because no one is demanding goods from them. There are people who want to work, but no one is asking them to work. They could work and produce wealth that could then be distributed too, but no one is demanding for them to do it. He suspected something weird was happening with aggregate demand, especially in the short run. In a very pure, very short run model, I know we have talked about a short run aggregate supply curve that is upward sloping. Something that might look something like that is actually starting to put some of the Keynesian ideas into practice. What I like to think of it is something in between. But if you think in the very short term, Keynes would say prices are going to be very sticky, especially in the short run, and I'll call it the very short run you have. Especially if the economy is producing well below its capacity, like it seemed to be doing during the Great Depression. Prices are sticky. That makes intuitive sense. If the economy is trying to get overheated, people are being overworked. You want them to work more, but hey, I want overtime. You want factories to operate faster. People are going to start. The utilization is high. People are going to start charging more and more. By no means do I think the Keynesian model is the ideal, and I don't think even Keynes would have thought the Keynesian model describes everything. It depends on the circumstance. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it so much. And keep it up, keep it healthy. I hope you are doing well and see you.